Hello, everyone. I am Aaron St. Dennis, the FF Mad Scientist, and welcome to the Mad Science Lab podcast. Today, we are continuing on with the My Thoughts on My Team series, and we will be doing the Cincinnati Bengals with Andrew Hall. Welcome, Andrew. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, glad to be here, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
You want to take a second here, tell everyone where they can find you?
Sure, yeah. So I'm currently writing for Fantasy Pros. I do a couple articles there a month during the off season, mostly almost entirely Dynasty focused at this point. I have a podcast of my own, Dynasty Junkies. You can find us on there on the DAP network, DAP_network on Twitter, and then on YouTube, of course. Also starting some stuff up with NFL All Day. Started a new podcast with Jordan Rains, 50 Shades of Drunk on that one, called All Day Both Ways. And then, of course, I have write articles for Dynasty Pros related to All Day as well. So kind of in a whole bunch of different things at this point, and never stopping. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I didn't realize until I started this little series here that's kind of redraft focused that I pretty much over the last year have transitioned to exclusively Dynasty, and I completely forget what redraft is until I have, like, at this point, single QB and redraft leagues, I'm down to like one or two of each, and they're my family and friends leagues, and I don't really ever pay attention to them. So
I'm the same. Yeah. I've only got a couple 1QB dynasty leagues. One of them's an old podcast, old website I work for that we're still going because it's dynasty, of course. And the other's a friends league. And then redraft. I mean, other than my home league, which I've been in for 23 years or whatever now, I try to do Scott Fishbowl if I'm lucky enough to get invited, but that's about it for redraft. And then there's charity leagues and best balls and all that. But yeah, there's so many different formats. It's nice to have a lot of different things to keep you busy, you know?
It's amazing how quickly you go from never playing Dynasty to transition to exclusively Dynasty. It's just a whole nother level. And then I got even sicker. I started with the Devi and the Campus to Canton. And next thing I know, it's like redraft. You mean only 1 year with one quarterback? Ugh.
I get to start over? I don't want to start over. Yeah. No, I know what you mean.
Oh, no. There's plenty of leagues where I wish I could. Can this be a redraft league?
Yeah.
Please?
Can we make this redraft instead of Dynasty? I like that.
I don't want this team. All right. So let me see if I can transition us here seamlessly. Beautiful. All righty. Pretty good. Today, we will be discussing the Cincinnati Bengals. This is one of the easier quarterback rooms to discuss. It is starter Joe Burrow, and who gives a crap? Jake Browning is what they have listed as the backup, but I'm sure everyone in Cincy hopes to never see him on the field again. Burrow, I'm going to assume for you, top 6. Did he have 5, 4? How high do you have him?
I think I have him as like QB4, give or take. And again, settings and everything like that matter. But we did actually have an interesting QB shakeup. And I think it was just today. Our normal backup, Brandon Allen, was signed by the 49ers. So he's been the backup to Burrow since he started. And now we get to kind of pivot to Jake Browning at this point, who I don't think has even seen a snap for the Bengals, if I'm not mistaken. But then also we might be looking in that market for, a Matt Ryan or somebody to come in, like one of those, traveling Carson Wentz kind of quarterbacks, someone that's just looking for a home and is okay carrying a clipboard and then kind of coming in a pinch. I could see us doing something like that just because of the way the Bengals are set up to kind of win this year. And kind of with Joe Burrow being on a potentially looking forward to a massive contract, you want to have a little bit of protection if something like that goes on. So, I mean, there's a lot of question marks, but otherwise, yeah, Joe Burrow, top 5 quarterback in redraft or dynasty, really.
Yeah, I think a lot of people expected them to kind of move on from Mixon and go with a running back, but like you said, Burrow's due to get a bag. They're going to have to extend Higgins here. This is kind of a year where you really have to ride Joe Mixon through the year and just hope you can finally get over the top here and win one, because Burrow they're going to have to bring back, but with what they pay him, can they afford to bring Higgins back? I don't think.
I think they can. I think they can. Here's the thing. So the way that they're going to do this is they're going to get creative with the cap, right? And that's kind of the only way you can do this anymore.
Have you been to New Orleans? The cap doesn't exist. It's not a real thing.
Exactly. Ultimately, they're going to find a way to make this happen. I think that's also why they agreed to his 5th-year contract, because that's only $29.5 million instead of his potentially $50 million price tag that he might be looking at with a contract. So it's easier for the Bengals then to sign into that deal, and it's guaranteed anyway. So Joe's going to get his money. And then, of course, whatever contract he signs will be almost all guaranteed too, I believe. It just, there's going to be a crazy amount of money. Joe's going to get his bag fine. Obviously, I think Higgins is going to come back. Everything about that man says he wants to stay in the city. He's still trying to get everybody to come here. He's been recruiting on Twitter. He just changed his number. I don't think any of that is because he wants to leave. He wants to stay and play with this team and actually win that title. So I think the Bengals find a way to make it work, to be honest.
Any idea what Mixon's making a year?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's something around 12 million or something like that was the cap hit this year. I could be wrong. But point is, I think Mixon was a potential casualty of the draft that they didn't draft a quarterback. If they were able to get somebody like Jahmyr Gibbs in the first or second, even if he dropped that far, obviously that wasn't even an option with Detroit ahead of him. But if something like that, if they could get a great value on someone, on one of those top tier running backs, they might look at moving on. But like you said, like there's no reason to do that this year in theory for the money. And I think Mixon's got some tread left on those tires, that overworn kind of analogy there. But I think Mixon's still going to be the guy. And Chase Brown is no sleeper. I mean, he's actually going to be a pretty good option. If he can start blocking and kind of pick up the blitzes and things like that, we might see him on the field a lot more often. I miss Samaje Perine if we're going to pivot to running.
I know.
Perine was a beast, and I loved having him as a change of pace back for Mixon and kind of spelling him and needing to come in on third down. But I hope Chase Brown can be as good as Perine. I guess we don't know, but I know he's talented, and I'm excited to see him play.
Yeah, so the running back room, they've got Mixon with Chase Brown, the rookie, as the backup, Chris Evans and Travion Williams. I assume, like I said, if they didn't move on from Mixon this year, they've got to likely next year, because between Burrow, Higgins, Chase will be due for a contract the following year. They're going to have a whole lot of the cap space tied up into their three top players. And I think if they get anything out of Brown, I think Mixon's all but gone next year. If not, they probably draft a rookie running back pretty high anyways. But I would say, as of now, Mixon, where do you see him this year? Is he still an RB1 for you?
I mean, almost entirely by default, I feel like he's an RB1. There's so many committees that have been kind of coming out of nowhere now. I mean, even like Bijan Robinson, of course, is in that top 5 category, right? But Tyler Algier wasn't a slouch last year and did all right if given the chance. And he's still got Cordero Patterson. Yeah. So like that's a 3-way headed kind of monster too. And I think all the teams are kind of going that way to kind of, save the legs or the arms or the bruising, I guess, whatever you want to call it, on their top running back. I mean, I've even seen some places saying that, Derrick Henry isn't a top running back. Well, if Derrick Henry's not a top 12 running back, I don't know how Mixon is, right? So it kind of depends on what you're looking for. And again, in redraft, I think Mixon's going to get 70% of the carries. And in my mind, volume is king with running backs, whether you pass or catch the ball or not. I'm just looking at how often are you on the field? And I think Mixon's going to be on the field a lot. I think he could do a lot worse. Now, granted, there are some other running backs that are still significantly better, like the Austin Eckler, Saquon Barkley, players like that, Nick Chubb, right? I'd probably rather have Chubb at this point. So I'm not necessarily willing to reach for Mixon, but if you get him as your RB2 and he's got that high-end RB1 kind of upside, I don't mind that at all, but I don't think I'm relying on him. I'd rather not.
Actually, I was thinking as you were talking there, and a lot of the older running backs, Mixon, Henry, well, Eckler, I think, is in a tier above them, but even Dalvin Cook, I think that whole tier there, the aging running backs, people are overvaluing youth as they transition more to dynasty. I think they're all going to come out of value, so I might own a decent amount of them. I mean, one of them inevitably is going to fall off a cliff. You just have to hope it's not the one you draft. So Mixon, I think I'm going to have some shares of him because he's going to come at a discount. Chase Brown is someone I was really high on early in the draft process. I wrote a couple of rookie profiles on him, loved him. The Senior Bowl killed me. He couldn't hold on to the ball. He fumbled and dropped. And I don't hate him. He's not a great blocker, and he's got to work on those hands. But if he's able to round his game out, he's not really, I don't see him as a threat to Mixon, but he's certainly a serviceable third down back. What are your thoughts on Brown?
Well, I like it too. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you mentioned the contract situation. I mean, we're again, as a Bengals fan, I say we a lot for better, for worse, but Bengals are going to need to get some discounts. And I think the only real way to do that at running back is to draft him and to draft him late and see what hits. Obviously, they've done that for the past few years with their current running back room of Chris Evans and Travion Williams, right? I think Evans showed a couple different sparks. He might be a good guy to kind of is getting older, and maybe he can get a little more experience on that. I think both Evans and Williams are better in the return game than anything else. And that's kind of why they're being kept. But I wouldn't be shocked if you see Brown, Evans, and Williams all kind of mix in as a third back behind Mixon. And I think really, and that's where you can maybe catch some value, because one of those guys in Dynasty, I'm sure, is on the waivers right now, right? Like Travion Williams and Chris Evans are probably on waivers in most Dynasty leagues. And if you've got a roster spot with, hell, I don't know, AJ Green still is on one of my rosters, right? He's done. He's gone. Okay, well, maybe I'll look at a running back there. right? And again, if Mixon does get traded or heaven forbid gets hurt or something, then you got Brown, Evans, and Williams, and I think that ball gets spread around, and I think you can do worse. But again, I think they're going to have to go to the draft almost every year and draft a running back. That's just been what they're doing, and it looks like it's sort of working for backup sake.
It's what a lot of teams are doing.
Yeah, they're cheaper. It's just the way to go. Yeah. It's the best place to save money because the shelf life on running backs is so short these days.
The new thing seems to be, instead of paying the second contract, you franchise tag them for a year, let them walk with their best years behind them, let somebody else overpay, and then go draft another rookie every year. Kind of like we're seeing with, was it Jacobs and Barkley?
Yeah.
Both got franchise tagged. They're going to use burn another year of a limited career at running back. And then, their value is going to decrease and they'll go to a younger guy. As you mentioned though earlier, with like the best ball type tournaments or the Scott Fish Bowl, I think Brown, Evans, and Williams are great targets in a format like that. Just, when you're down to round 20 in Fish Bowl and there's no waiver wire, you're just throwing darts and pray to hit one of these guys. So I think, like I said, that's another one where I'm going to own a couple of them in late rounds where available. Probably won't go too heavy, won't put too many eggs in the basket, but
it's not just a bedroom. On that note too, I mean, it's one of those things like on the current underdog best ball tournament, right? You get 18 rounds, I believe. I don't know if I would take any of those. Obviously Brown's going before that. I don't think I would take Evans or Williams in that. But if you've got a spot and want to differentiate, and it's a best ball tournament that we're drafting here in May or something, right? Like, I don't mind the idea of like taking a flyer on Chris Evans with your last pick and just saying like, hey, if that comes through, I'm dominating, right? And some of those bigger tournaments, you got to differentiate somehow. Maybe that's how you decide to do it, is throw a flyer on one of these backups. I don't know if Mixon's there all season. I don't know. I mean, he's had health issues and injury concerns and things like that. I mean, we don't know what we're getting exactly, which makes me think Evans could have some value. It'd be kind of entertaining to see.
I've got Chase Brown myself on a few taxi squads. I don't see him, unless something really goes wrong with Mixon, I don't see him cracking my lineup, but you never know. But for now, I'll leave him on the taxi squad.
Yeah, that's a good place for him.
Moving on to a very interesting wide receiver room. Very loaded with talent, with the exception of the two Trents I'm not real fond of, but they've got Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, then a couple of my personal favorite sleepers, Charlie Jones out of Purdue, and Andre Yoshivas. I always get this mixed up. Was he out of Cincy or was it Stanford? Cincy?
Yoshivas was Stanford, yeah. So Yoshivas and Jones both are interesting kind of draft prospects that I had some awareness of course, going into the draft, but neither one were, top prospects. They're both pretty speedy. They both could find a home right away. I mean, Trent Taylor was kept on primarily as a punt returner. That's pretty much his feature. Trenton Irwin, I think, did a terrific job in short term and kind of spot utility usage, I guess, whatever you want to call it, with either Boyd or Higgins out. He actually did really well. I liked Irwin a lot, so I'm glad they're keeping him around. But in my opinion, I think Jones and Yoshivas are both going to be those kind of players that might get, 10, 20 snaps a game if they're lucky. I mean, if we get a blowout or something and we're up, 48-10, I could see him throwing in Yoshivas and seeing what he's got, or Jones and seeing about how he could streak the offense. It also gives us some flexibility to go to more 5 receiver sets, which I think is kind of interesting because our tight ends are a little bit lacking, which we'll get into. But again, like with Chase, Higgins, and Boyd, I don't think anybody's upset with those as your top 3.
But going back to Yoshivas, I can never get his name right, and Jones, those are two guys. I'm a spreadsheet guy. I'm all about the analytics. For me, those two guys, there's no reason why either of them should ever be a thing in fantasy football. But watching their combines and their senior bowls and just their film, there's something about them where it gives you hope that maybe they can do it. But I would have them there again. There's someone I want to stash on my taxi squad, draft in late rounds of best ball. They're probably long shots. It's a really, really late round lottery ticket. But, stranger things have happened. As you said, though, this is all about Chase and Higgins with a little bit of Boyd sprinkled in. Chase and Higgins, if healthy, you think they both managed to crack the top 12? More importantly, Higgins, I assume Chase is the top 12.
I think so. Yeah, I think Chase is a lock for the top 12. I mean, again, he's number 1 or number 2 in receiver for Dynasty in most rankings and everything like that, just because of the production and how well he plays with Burrow and how their connection is. And I think in a lot of leagues, Higgins as your wide receiver 1 might be a little risky, but I don't mind it because, again, he's got that ceiling. And if there's going to be anybody that gets covered, it's going to be Chase, right? And that means leaves Higgins wide open. So it's kind of like that really hard 1A, 1B kind of thing. It's hard to guard them both. You can't double team both, or you're leaving Boyd wide open, or you're only rushing 3 and you're giving Burrow all the time he needs to get him in the ball anyway. So I mean, again, I think there is definitely some upside for both Chase and Higgins on this offense. And again, they didn't add a tight end. They didn't add a pass catching running back. They didn't add another, second round receiver. It's going to be those guys again. And I don't think that's a bad thing for fantasy. We know who it is. I kind of like that. Not only as a Bengals fan, but as a fantasy player, it's nice to know kind of what we're getting into, right?
Yeah, I had a couple of these guys on a few championship squads last year, and they were real nice. Transitioning to tight end, I kind of think they did add tight end in a way. It was a guy that I was always high on who never stayed healthy, never came around. I loved Irv Smith. Drew Sample, I think, is just there. What are your thoughts on the acquisition of Irv Smith?
I think Irv actually has a lot of upside, and I think Irv is one of those guys that has been injured and kind of, I would almost call it like a post-hype sleeper. Like he got a lot of hype coming in and was on an offense that should have been good and then kind of got hurt. I like Drew. I think Drew Sample's good. I think Drew Sample's not that bad at all, but he's not threatening Irv Smith. And I think that means it's Irv's chance to shine. And we're going to see pretty quickly, in my opinion, in the preseason even, whether or not Irv clicks with this offense. I think he will. I think he's got the talent still. I don't think he's a scrub coming in from the grocery store or anything like that. Like, he's definitely knows what he's doing at the position. He's just had a bad luck injury streak. And honestly, like any player like that, I think has a chance if you've got the talent. But I don't see Irv Smith being a top 12 tight end, right? And when it comes to tight end, especially for fantasy, you've got the top 4 or 5 players, and then the rest is kind of a crapshoot. So my thought process there, especially for best ball tournaments and things like that, I love drafting Irv Smith with my last pick. If I've only got 2 tight ends or something where it's like, hey, it's a best ball, I kind of want to have 3 tight ends. Irv could get that breakout season that we've all kind of been waiting years for now. And on an offense like this that's so high powered, you need a red zone threat. And I don't think, especially without Pirine, right? I don't think anyone else on this offense is really a big bone red zone threat. Maybe Higgins, maybe Chase, maybe Boyd. I get it. They're good. But having a tight end that can produce in a pass catching fashion, I think that lines up for Irv Smith perfectly.
There are going to be some high draft picks in fantasy on this team. With that in mind, in what you expect to be ADP, obviously you're not a psychic, with what you expect to be ADP or even current best ball, who's the player you think you would be most likely to target in your fantasy leagues on the Bengals?
Well, I mean, it's kind of a little bit chalky, but if we go with one QB, it's Jamar Chase. I want to go with the guy that's the best at the position. I have no problem at all taking Chase in the first round if I can. I'm not sure I'd take him 1 overall. It might be 2, 3, 4, somewhere in there. And if he falls to you at 5, 6, 7, I'm happier than ever. The other one I would mention though is Higgins. And I think sometimes there are drafts where he's going really early. I've seen that myself, even in best ball, where he goes in the second round, because like you said, he has that ability to be a top 12 quarterback or top 12 receiver because of his quarterback. And so there's some people out there that are really high on him. But I have also seen him at least in some mock drafts and other things I've done, where he falls into the 3rd round or 4th round of dynasty startups. And that just blows my mind, because I think people are like, well, they're worried if he's going to stay. Is he, where does he go from here? Can he get the ball enough? And I'm fine taking him at that kind of price. So for me, it's the receivers, mainly because, like we said with Mixon, he's got a lot of question marks. I'm not sure I want to go down that path. And Burrow, I love taking a QB, but in one QB, I don't really. I'm fine waiting most of the time, really. And same with tight end. Like, I'm not reaching for Irv Smith. He's a fine late round player. So for me, it's all about the receivers.
Yeah, Higgins was the answer for me. He's someone I'm really high on. Higgins. At one point, I thought they were a 1A, 1B. It's not. He's the 2. But Higgins, he's just someone, even in redraft, where nobody really cares if he's going to walk after this season. I get him consistently later than I would ever expect. And so Higgins is the guy I've had him, I think, a lot of rosters in the last two years. On the other side, who is a guy you think is going to be overvalued and you'll probably avoid?
Man, that's a tough one, because the value I think is so good on a lot of these guys. But I mean, I guess overvalued, I would go with Higgins, because again, I've seen him go so early, and sometimes it just blows my mind. Yeah. I'm like, why are we taking Higgins in the second?
League dependent, I guess, eh?
Very much. Yeah, very draft dependent. There are definitely some drafts where, and I think you've probably seen this too, there are some drafts where you get like 10 receivers in the first 2 rounds, or they're just everybody's heavy receiver and everybody's pushing the running backs down. You end up getting Barkley in the 3rd or 4th or 5th. Like, that just blows my mind. But then there are other drafts where, I mean, I think I was in one the other day. It was a underdog, like fast 1 minute clock kind of thing. And there was like 4 running backs in the first round and then like 7 in the second round. And it was just pushing all the receivers down, because for whatever reason, those guys wanted running backs. They, wanted to do the hero RB or whatever. And I think there was even think it was Diggs that was there in the third. And I'm like, how can I not take Diggs in the third? And Higgins was still on the board. So it's literally just play your league, play your draft, let the value come to you is what I always say. But yeah, I think Higgins is the one I've seen the most variance on. So that's probably the one I would go with.
I think I like that answer. I'm going to go with a weird one here. It's Joe Burrow. I love Joe Burrow, love the talent, but I think after all the years of everyone going late round quarterback, after last year, I think we're going to see quarterbacks go higher than ever, which I don't mind if the quarterback you're taking in the second round is Mahomes, Josh Allen, even Jalen Hurts. But I think you're going to see them go in the second, third round. And then in the third, fourth, and fifth, we're going to see 10 quarterbacks off the board in the first 5 rounds, something we never see before, even in like the expert leagues. I just think the market is due to really overreact, and quarterbacks are going to go early and often. So I'm probably, if I'm drafting a quarterback that early, I'm either going to be early enough to get one of the elite, or I'm probably going to wait on the lower tier. I seem to be getting a lot of Tua. I know the injury concerns.
Tua's been dropping.
Tua, Dak, a lot of them have been dropping. Even Kyler, I get not in redraft because Kyler's obviously, I don't think he'll play the first half of the season, but
right.
All right. If there was one sleeper on this team, who do you think it is?
I hate to say it, but I'm going with Joe Mixon. I think there's a lot of potential chip on his shoulder here, and that's why I think he's going really late. And is obviously, we just talked about it. Like, is he going to be a top 12 running back? I don't know, but I think a lot of this talk could be used as I got to get my stuff together, and I think now is the time to do it. I think Mixon is very talented. I think he had a lot of injuries last year, and again, Pirine stole a lot of his carries. I'm not sure if Chase Brown steals that much, again, because he's not great in pass protection and blocking and things like that. It could be that we just see Joe Mixon kind of ball out this year, especially on it being kind of a prove it sort of year. I wouldn't be shocked to see Joe Mixon finish as RB3, right? Like that's entirely within the range of outcomes. So for me, that's kind of where I go for my sleeper. Very cheap, but a ton of upside.
I agree. And the first thing that comes to mind, and this is going to sound gross, but James Conner. For 2 years in a row, we just said, oh, he's dead. He's old and washed up. You got him late, at the end of the running back dead zone. And he was a top 6 to 12 running back both years and was a huge value.
It's people leagues gross. For sure.
It's going to be gross, but it could win you leagues if he doesn't fall off the cliff this year.
Well, that's why, again, if you're drafting him as your RB2, right? If you're taking him behind a guy like Barkley or I don't know, Bijan or Brees, one of these other guys that you're taking as an RB1, and you can kind of stash Mixon in that RB2 slot, and then he balls out like a top 5 running back. I mean, you're most likely dominating every week with that kind of performance. And I'm not saying other running backs in that range don't have that same upside. I'm just saying Mixon definitely does. And I think people are forgetting it.
Absolutely. So last year I have them as 3rd in the AFC with a 12-4 record. Where do you think they finish this year in the division? And 12 wins, over, under, or the same?
I'm going to go with over 12. I think they get 13. I think that this is a tough division. It's a tough conference. We get to play the Bills. We get to play the Chiefs. We get to play all the top teams again, because again, like last year we were top and we got the top schedule. That first year we were kind of lucky, but we got that easier schedule because we were lighter in the year before. But yeah, I think that there's still a high likelihood that we can finish really well. I think our defense still has to finish shaping up. We got to see what they have. Our offensive line still has to come together. So there's some other question marks for me here in May. But I wouldn't be shocked at all if we go 13-4 and again finish as the top seed, one of the top seeds, but definitely finishing in the top seed in the AFC North, and then kind of maybe, I don't know, hopefully getting that bye in the AFC conference. But that's such a brutal conference; it's tough to get there.
Yeah. I think I have them winning the AFC North again. I'm going to play it safe and just go 12 wins again. There's a few question marks there, but I think they're definitely the class of their division. All right. Well, thanks for joining me, Andrew. Would you like to take another chance to tell everyone where it is they can find you?
Yeah, sure. So in case you didn't hear before, I'm at Andrew Hall FF. You can find me on Twitter. Obviously, I'm on Fantasy Pros. I got a podcast. We do a Dynasty Junkies every Thursday. Me and 2 co-hosts of mine, we just talk Dynasty all year long. We never stop. A lot of that does come in handy for redraft and best ball and things like that too. We talk a lot about trades and values and things like that. So definitely come check us out if you're on there. And again, Aaron, thanks so much for having me. This is great.
No, thanks for being here. It was great. It was lovely having you. Welcome back anytime. Once again, guys, that was my thoughts on the Cincinnati Bengals with Andrew Hall. This has been the Mad Science Lab podcast. Thanks for joining us. Everyone have a great day. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks.